Hi everyone. Okay, so here is a video of the dining table chairs that I built. It's a custom design with custom paint. So you can see it really finishes off this table set that I built nicely. This video will be a full detailed video of how these chairs were built, including how I did the paint wash on it for the final look. I hope you enjoy the video. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Alright, so doing the design for the leg, here's how I have it measured out. So this is a 42-inch piece of 2x6, and what I'm doing is I'm marking 3 inches off at this end for the start. So I'm using this, but you can use a tape measure as well. And I'm going 3 inches, and then here's the base. And then I'm coming in a total of 14 inches. And then adding 4 to 18 inches. And then on this side, I'm doing 2 3/4. Two and 3/4. And then 2 inches from that, so it's 2 inch wide at that part. And then I'm coming in, I want this to be 3 1/4 inch thick here for the middle of the leg. So I'm going to 3 1/4 for the middle of the leg, be here. And then we'll connect all these lines together. And I'm going to do a closer shot for you. But so this is to give you a chair leg that the height of it will be a total of 42, making the back 42 inches high. If you want it shorter, then you could always just not go quite so long of a board. Connecting to the inside mark here. And then we're going to go ahead and move that. Do the same thing over here, connecting my point there to my mark here. And then we have this mark we marked, goes right here. And then I'll connect the solid line to these 2 ends. And there you go. So I will go over this with you. So basically, we'll recap what we just did, give you a better visual. But I marked this a total of 3 inches. From here to here is 3 inches. And then I measured from there to 14 inches and put a mark. Added 4 more inches to 18 inches, put a mark. And then on this end, I measured up 2 3/4 for this mark, and then gave it a 2 inch width from that mark to here. And then you draw a line, connect up, draw this line, connect up, and then what I did is 3 1/4 inch down this way, straight down, and that's where we connect this point to there, and then this point to there. and then connected this line here. So in doing so, you can see you have the actual outline of the leg that you want to do. An example of that already cut would be, let's choose this one out right here. So you can see when I take a previously cut one, it sits right on that line. And that is how you get your chair leg. So the way this will sit will be like that. Obviously this has to be smoothed up, cleaned up, but so this will be the back leg of the chair. Now that all the legs are cut, I clamped them together because they're not perfect. So we clamp them together, and then you can start using a belt sander, and you can start using a palm sander, and just cleaning it all up, evening it all out so they're all the same, with the same curves, same smoothness, and then we'll move on to the next. So after sanding, I'll do a little bit more, but you can see how much this all cleans up, and they all look the same. So with a little bit of sanding on the other side, you can see, looks pretty good. So one of the things I did to speed up the process, make it easier, is once I've cut one of my X boards for the back of the seat, then the measurements on this are 17 by 5/8, and that is measured from tip to there, and then from this tip to this way, cut with a 45-degree angle. And I measure it, so once I've done it once, I can take and line up that piece, and moving forward, I can cut all my remaining pieces. So what I would do is take it and mark it, and then once I've done that, make sure I'm marked up here so I can actually do it here. Then you can line this up with your saw. It's always better to cut with a little excess, and then you can always trim more off later. So I'll go on the safe side, maybe start it about there, right there at the line, and then hold it back up to my template. If it's not exact match, I'll just take a little bit more off, and I'll repeat this process for all the boards that I need to make all 4 chairs the X pattern in the back. So we cut these 1x3s, 17 and 5/8 inch long, and 1x3s are actually 3/4 thick, not 1 inch thick. It's the difference of the nominal size versus the actual dimensional size. So instead of being 3 inches long or 3 inches wide, they're actually 2.5 inches wide, and they're 3/4 inch thick instead of 1 inch thick. So we want to go halfway on these notches so they will sit inside each other. And so if it's 3/4 inch thick, that's the same as 6/8 inch, and half of that would be 3/8 inch. So we'll come over, we'll set this table saw height, and you can do this with the skill saw, you can even do this with the miter saw. All you got to do is set the stop on the miter saw so it still leaves 3/8 inch, or same with your skill saw. I'm just going to use a table saw so I can just quickly reproduce these. Since we're doing 8 of them, I've already done the first one to test it, and I know that this right here is what I need to take out exactly the space that I need. So what you do is you'll mark your center point and give it a total of 2.5 inches in width that you'll open it, which allows the other board to sit right into place. This one's a little loose, but you can see the other way it's tight, and I'll do all the rest of them tight like that one is, where it just will barely snug in, giving a nice tight solid connection. So now we're cutting the top and the bottom board that go across to make the top and the bottom of the X pattern for the back of the chair. Now those need to be 16 inches long. So you can either mark your board and use your miter saw and straighten it out, or you could use a table saw, or you could use a skill saw, depending on what tools you have available. Since I do have a table saw right here, I'm just going to set my table saw up for 16 inches. And then I will cut 4 boards. If you don't have a table saw, you can mark it 16 inches, cut it off with a skill saw, or with a miter saw just set to 0. Alright, so here's a couple of tips. I use some spare 1x4s to make my 1x3s. And to do this, if you have a table saw, all you have to do is set it up. 1x3 is actually 2.5 inches. So you set your measurement to 2.5, and then you run through and you will trim off the extra to make it 2.5 instead of 3.5, turning a 1x4 into a 1x3. I decided to cut them to length first. That way it's less when I'm trimming these up. And the reason I did it this way, instead of trimming off 3/4 here, is because by doing so, the pinch point of the wood is inside the saw blade, and the excess that's not pinched is on this side. So instead of cutting a little bit off of this piece like this and leaving it wedged in there, we're cutting it to actual size and dimension, which is easier. So that's why we set this to the 2.5 mark. And then we will use our push stick to be safe. Another quick tip is, generally you don't want your blade any higher than it needs to be to cut the wood. And that's just an extra safety precaution. In case you were to actually catch yourself on it, it's not going to get you nearly as bad as if you have this way up higher. It's just asking for more risk. Alright, so now we have our 4 tops and bottoms in the back and our 4 X-frames, and this will all be assembled together, and there's the 4 backs. And then as before, there's the 4 sets of 2 for the back legs. Alright guys, so you got your 1x4 and your 1x3, both 16 inches long, and then you've got your 2 angle cuts that fit together. And these are 17 and I think 5/8 inch long, and 3/8, allowing them to fit inside each other. A nice snug fit is what you want. Keeps it nice and secure. And these will position together like so. Alright, so what we're going to do next is actually glue this piece together. We'll clamp it, and then we'll glue these pieces together, and we'll hit it with the brad nailer, some 2-inch brad nails to hold that in place. Do the same on this side, and then we'll let the glue set until tomorrow. Alright, so let's get started. So, brush it on a little bit here. I'm just using a whatever cheap little brush that I found, a scrap brush, just to spread the glue around. So now that that part's done, take a clamp, squeeze it in place. Go. All right, and then what I'll do is I will let this get set like this. So we're gonna put glue again. Alright, do the same thing on this side. Alright, so there's that. Now I gotta flip around and get this top side. What I'll do is I'll take this off for now. Wow. I clamp this on. So what I'll do is add my glue. Okay, I'm going to reclamp this for now to make sure this has a nice solid seal while I go on to the next one. Let that set. Alright, so I let these sit overnight so the glue could set. So I'm going to use these 1x4s to make my 1x3 pieces that are 17.5 inches long. So first I'm going to cut them to their 17.5 inch lengths, and then I'll rip them all to 1x3s, which is a nominal size of 1x2.5, well, 3/4 by 2.5. So these 1x4s need to be 1x3s, which is really 2.5 inches. So we'll set that there. Okay guys, so the stretchers, I'm using a lot of miscellaneous wood that I have floating around in here. So I've got this piece of 1x6 and I'm using this to make some of the stretchers. The stretcher size actually needs to be 1 1/4 in width. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make about 4 1 1/4 pieces out of this 1x6. And so to do that, first I'm going to cut it to length, which I'm going to go about 19 1/4, and then afterwards we'll be putting the slight angle on them to tap into the bottom of the leg. But for now I'm going to go about 19 1/4, get them all sized out, and then I'll do the final about a 10-degree cut to match up each individual one to the chair. Alright guys, so I'm setting up a template, that way I can do it consistently for every chair and every assembly. So what I'm doing is, so this will be the front leg. I give myself a straight level, put the front leg, and this is the apron, which I'm going to have it 1/4 inch from the inside. So this will give me the right spacing, so it's just 1/4 inch tucked in. Instead of centering it or having it flush, I'll just give it that kind of a design. And then having that there, I'm doing this one-handed so I can show you guys how that go here. Lining this up. In this way, it will sit nice and flat on the ground because I'm using this level. And then I want to make sure that the height is the same on all of them too. So I cut these spacers. These spacers are 14 inches and this board is 2.5 inches. So giving me a total bottom of the seat before the plywood and the cushion of 16.5, just as planned. So with the template, I will get consistent 1/4 inch spacing from the front side. When I do the other leg and arm, I will just flip it over so it's matching set on the other chair as well. So what we'll do is we'll use pocket holes to put these two in next. Make sure you use plenty of glue, pocket hole screws, and that will hold this firmly in place. And then after that, I will do another one of these pieces to give me the height that I want. And I believe I'm going to go probably about 5 inches to the bottom. I'll check it out, measure it for sure, but then I'll create those spacers as well. And then I cut all these 19 1/4 to make sure they're long enough. And then all I have to do is cut my 10-degree angle, or if it needs to be adjusted a little bit, I can. So this will sit right in there in place. Use a pocket hole screw for each of these as well. And then I can recreate the same set of legs and arm or seats for every one of the chairs consistently. Okay, so setting up the Kreg jig for the pocket holes for the aprons, we're going to use the 3/4 inch setting because that's what the wood is. So you set it here 3/4 inch, and then you'll set this for a length of 3/4 as well. Right at that point needs to match where the 3/4 is. You don't measure it to that point, you measure it to that point. Okay, so that's set for 3/4, this is set for 3/4, and then this clamp is set where it clamps it in tight, and then the holes that I'll be using will be A and B, which will give me two nice spaced holes for two pocket holes on each side of this board. Okay, so for those of you who've never done a pocket hole before, the guide is right there. Something like that. And see, there's your pocket holes. So what happens is I need to do the other side as well. Make sure you line up the other side with the same facing side. Same thing, you'll center it in place, which looks like it should be right around there, and then clamp it down. Okay, same thing again. Okay, so there's our board, and this would fit in just like that, and then next you would screw in with the pocket hole screws. Okay, so fire glue. Okay, so now that's all lined up. Take our 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws and take them in. Same thing on this side. Okay, looks like we're good. And we will do the same thing for all the aprons to connect the back leg to the front leg. With the stretcher, this particular one, when I put the 10° on it, I had to cut it to a length of, at longest part, from here to the longer part of the cut is about 19 1/16. So in general, they're going to be about 19 inches long. This is why I cut them all to 19 1/4, because each one is going to be a little bit different. And what I want to do is I want to custom cut each one so that it's a perfectly nice, snug fit. The reason I want to do that is because if you just cut them all before you actually fit them to, let's say, 19 inches, then that means that this right here would have a little bit more space, and when you tighten it together, it's going to pull on this, causing tension on that, but also changing the angle of the bottom of this. And we want these to sit nice and flush on the ground the way they sit on this level, the straight edge. So to do that, if I take and match this up last and custom cut each one, then we get a nice perfect fit, and it will work out just right. Okay, so I do the pocket holes for the stretchers the same way as I did the aprons. The only difference is I'm going to line it up so these two close holes will fit inside this stretcher. Whereas when I did the apron, it was these two further holes. But now I'm going to want this for my spacing. And I'll run the same thing. I'll run the drill through, and then I'll go set it up on the chair and attach it. Alright, so you want to do the pocket holes after you've made your angle cut, because what we'll do is let the board sit at the angle it's going to attach to, and then when you do the pocket holes, they'll go straight down. So instead of having pocket hole screws go in at a different angle, this way they'll match flush up with the board. So this will show you where your lines are at. So by seeing those lines, I can make sure that I'm lined up centered, and that's where the pocket hole will actually go into. So I can nudge it over a little bit more, make sure it's centered, clamp it back down. And then it looks like I'm lined up, and now I'll put the pocket holes in. Alright, so now that that's in there, we'll pop these ones in. Alright, so that is how you complete one of the legs. And then we should have nice equal spacing. So we're going to do the same thing again for the other side of the chair. The only difference this time is you see I rotated it so it's facing the other direction. That way the spacing on the outside of the chair is still that 1/4 inch spacing, the same as it was for the other side, which was facing the other direction. Other than that, it's the same process, and then we'll repeat this through all 4 chairs. Alright, so I'm working on the apron that will connect 2 of the legs together. So, here's how it all works out. This is my apron, 16 inches long. I clamped one of my legs, the front and the back, the one side, this is the right side, and using the same spacers as I used before, put it on my spacers so I get this nice level right from the top. Square that up. I'm pushing this down so it's against the spacer as I clamp it. That's perfectly lined up. There we go. Alright. Now I can put up my joint. My 2 pocket hole screws. And by the way, I put this on about 6 for torque, because you don't want to strip out the wood, but you want it to be snug enough that it actually will tighten it down. So like that. One more, same thing. Putting the pocket holes on the stretcher like that. There you go. Alright, ready for the next one? So I'm using the spacers, so the front will be the same as the sides. Line that up there, and then holding it down, clamp it tight enough. Just want enough pressure that it won't move while we're putting it in. And then, there we go, hold it right here. And do one more, same thing. There we go. Alright, so next I set up a new jig so I can put these in consistently in the same. So I clamped this 4x4 onto this leg, and then this leg moves independent, so I can put some glue on these ends. You're going to want to do both glues now, because once you put one in, you won't be able to do the other one. So we're going to put glue on both of these, and then I'll put it together, and I will pocket screw them in. Now just make sure I spread it evenly with this, that way I don't have to use my other hand to get the brush and hold it. Instead I'm just smearing it around. There we go. Alright, I'm using my spacers over here, so it's equally spaced just like before. Push that down. I can use this spare spacer here even though I don't need it yet to hold that one down, but what I'm going to do is clamp this front piece first. And right before I get there, okay, so I'm just going to make sure this is kind of squared up as true as it can be. And clamp it together. That's pushed down. This is squared up. There we go. Okay. Okay. Now I will put in my pocket hole screws. Alright, now that that's in there good, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Take this clamp, move it over here. I will use these spacers. Make sure I'm good here and there, like so. Alright, so as I'm putting this one in, I'm going to hold this down and line it up the best that I can. Okay. So I'm putting the pocket holes on the back X-frame that will be used to mount to the legs of the chair. Now I could have done these when the boards were by themselves using this pocket hole jig, but I decided to wait to make sure there wasn't another way that I actually preferred to hook them up, but I think this is the way to go. So I'm just using a portable little pocket hole jig. You could have already put them on, but if not, then what I did is I made a clamp system, so this is giving support to this leg and keeping this from sliding off, and then this is cut at an angle to match that, allowing me to put compression on this and hold this here so it doesn't move. So by rigging it up this way, what I'm doing is making sure that I have good consistent hold while I put my pocket hole in. Again, you could have done this using a bigger system before you assembled, but now that these are assembled, this is how I'm adding the pocket holes after the fact. Alright guys, so here's an example of how I'm putting the back on. So let me come over here. So this is the back of the full chair. So what I'm doing is the same thing, I've got my little spacers that I've been using all along to give me the space there and the space there. I'm using the same thing to give me space in the front, so it's not at the very edge. And then I'm using this as a spacer on how far down, so they're all the same from the top. You could measure, but you just pop it in place and it holds it for you. And then I make sure that these are all lined up nice and level. And then, of course, I'll remove this, and then I will be able to drill in the pocket holes there and the pocket hole screws there to mount this. So I'm going to take it apart, put glue, and then I'll put it back together again and screw them in. Alright, so we're all set. Spacers look good. I got the glue on there. I got my pressure on 6, and then time to screw it in. Alright, so I got the back apron lined up, level with everything, and then I use the spacer just like before and made sure it fits just right on both sides, and it's level below and above. Now I'm just going to do the pocket hole screws, and same thing, pop those in, drill them in, and we're good. Alright, we're doing the last back stretcher. It's all lined up. And so now your frame of your chair is done. I think it looks good. Okay, so I gave the chairs a quick sanding, and then in the pocket holes that were up top, I use this all-purpose wood filler. Use whatever brand you want, but this just is pretty easy. Just squeeze a lump of it in there, and then come back with your putty knife and just spread over it. Now you don't want to go so tight that you're trying to make a smooth surface right away, because once it dries you may have like a little bit of a divot or a little bit of spacing. So leave a little excess, that way when this dries and hardens you can sand it smooth and it completely covers the pocket holes. The pocket holes being those. So those, I had one on top as I had shown you previously on each one of these. And so now that that's there, I also took and filled up, there was a couple of spaces, you know, not all my joinery was perfect. You can see that those are nice and snug, but this one, it actually had a little bit of space in there, so I just threw a little wood filler in there to make it look good. I had a little knot that was exposed right there, so I put a little wood filler in there, and then once that dries I'll sand it smooth. And I did the same on, I believe, right there. There was also some space, and so I just put a little wood filler in there. So once you sand it down, you're just making your joinery and your wood look better. There's a little bit of space back there, so I threw a little in there. Alright, once that dries overnight, I will sand it tomorrow and be ready to do the first coat of primer. Alright guys, so next I cut the plywood out, and this is a finished plywood, 3/4 inch, and I basically cut it a little bit bigger than a perfect match, because your measurements on your chairs may not all be perfectly square. Hopefully they are, but just in case they're not, give yourself a little room to work with. And then I went back through, and next I need to edge this and sand it, make it smooth before I paint it. But you can see I cut it in a way so I can line this up for the most part and leave this sticking out, giving it a little bit of a bolder look and giving it some angles. And do the same thing on this other side. See the front, it closes in nice on it. And then this will be painted a wash color that will match what the tabletop and the bench top is that I designed. Alright guys, so now all the pieces are cut. I actually sanded down the edge here to give it a more finished look. Make sure it's nice and smooth when you're sitting your legs on there. This will be painted and clear coated, but this just gives it a little bit of a design to it and it smooths it out so it's not rough. So to do that, simply I'm just using a palm sander. So you can see that I got a nice little corner bevel there. I'm just gonna Alright, so here's our 4 chairs sanded. The next thing will now be paint for these seat bottoms. Once they're painted, then they can be attached from underneath. You can just attach with a couple of pocket holes up here at the top. And that's it. I'm moving on to the seats of the dining table chairs. And what I like to do is prop them up on something so I can do one coat on the top and also hit these sides because they're not laying directly on this table. And then what I'll do is once that dries, I'll flip these over, and once I flip them over, then I will hit the bottom. I will let the bottom dry. I will hit it again so it's got its second coat, and then I will, once it's dried, flip them back over and I'll do the final coat for the base coat on the top and on the sides. And this way I can make sure that the final coat is done in a way that it's all clean and tucked in on the top and the sides before I move on to the wash, which I'll show next after painting this. Alright, so today I'm going to be going over how to do a wash. Prep work, what you need to do is have a spray bottle. This is just water. And then you need to have your piece of cloth. In my case, I'm using t-shirt, and the paint that you're going to be utilizing. And what you'll do is you'll spray it on your surface. You'll spray this cloth down so it's damp as well with water, and then you'll dip it in your paint, and then you'll just drag it across, creating the design that you want. So let me show you how this works. So first, I will just apply a mist of water, and then I will do the same thing to my cloth here, which I don't want to get the board anymore wet, so wet it down. I'm going to spread the water around a little bit. Okay, so then you'll dip your cloth in there, choose a starting point, and then drag it across. And I choose different variations so I don't end up having really bold spots on the edges. as you can see, you start creating the pattern that you want. You're doing this somewhat quickly because you don't want the material to get too dry, because you're kind of wiping off the moisture as you're dragging this across. And that looks pretty good. And then if I wanted to make sure, if I wanted a little bit darker, I could always add a little bit more and run through with a little bit darker material, not press quite as hard, have more paint. So if I want to have a little bit darker spots, like in here where it's kind of lighter. Now what you don't want to do is spray water on it again once you've kind of created this, because what you'll do is you'll end up having little droplets or watermarks. So you want to get it plenty wet in the beginning and then do what you need to do and then be done with it. And that's it. And then when this dries, it will have a little bit different of a look, because once the paint dries, it's going to lighten up a little bit and everything will blend in a little bit more. But there we go. And that's how you do a wash and do custom paint. And you can choose any colors you want. Right now I'm using somewhat of a gray with an espresso cappuccino color, and when it dries you really have some grays and browns all mixed in, which is really nice. So now that my paint has dried, it's been a few days to make sure it's fully dried. The paint can actually cure for even longer than that, but it's dry enough that I can go ahead and apply my clear coat now. So what I'm using to match the rest of the dining table that I've already built is I'm applying the clear matte finish of polyurethane, and I'm using the triple coat. But I'm still going to apply a couple coats of that, but I just like using the thick stuff because when I apply it on I get a lot more in one setting, and I'll do a few coats of that. So I'm going to end up doing 2 or 3 coats on this seat top here, and when it dries I'll lightly sand it and put another coat on and do that a couple of times till it's finished. But all you need is your finished product, your polyurethane. This is the brand I'm using. Obviously there's other brands out there, it just depends on, and then I'm just using a nice decent brush to apply it. And then you'll basically put this in a mixing dish, and you will put a little bit on your brush and just apply it with smooth strokes. And you want to go all the way across. So as you can see, I've got it on, and I've already applied it once, but I'm just going through and applying smooth, even strokes. And that way it's all nice and smooth and even, and it says on the container that it's self-leveling. But you'll notice that you get a little bunch up at the corners once you actually apply it through. So I'm just going through and spreading it around the edges, like you can see how it will do something like that, until you go through and you give it the light cleanup so you don't have any of those runs. Like that. You're just trying to get rid of any bulky spots or runs. So it's fairly easy to apply. You just have to pay attention that you're not starting to get drips anywhere. So when you're done, it should look like this. See, it's nice and evenly laid out everywhere. And then you will just simply let that dry. And once it dries, you'll give it a light sanding. It says with like 220 grit, a light sanding before you apply your next coat. See a little spot right there that's starting to drip. I'm attaching the seat bottoms to the top of these chairs with pocket holes, and I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, and then 2 on this side, 4, 5. So this will sit right on top there, and then I'm using the pocket holes which I pre-set up. So you got 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5. So I'm using those 5 pocket holes to attach this board on top. So what I did is, I like the idea of having a little weight in the seat, just like if somebody was sitting in it, just as I'm setting it and drilling these pocket hole screws in. And then of course I clamped these 4 sides, or the 4, 2 on each side, so I can actually put these 2 in first, and those 2, and then I'll clamp here in the front and put the last one in right there. Take all the stuff off here.